Except for Bryce.
Do we have Bryce on, Sam?
He says just go ahead.
Did he?
He's trying to figure out some technical issues.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, we're going to go ahead and, where's my mic? All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us this evening. Today is October 17th, 2023. We do have all board members in attendance except for Board Member Williams, who's working through some, or Vice President Williams, who's working through some technical elements to join us remotely. It looks like he's being admitted now. But we do have a need for a closed session this evening, so I will seek a motion from the board.
I move that the board on October 17th, 2023 go into closed executive session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation and the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the table. Any discussion to the motion?
Please clarify who you're going to call the second, because that was pretty close.
Second.
I'll call Mohammed. All right. Thank you for that. Business Administrator Kersley. Any discussion to the motion?
Nope.
Seeing none, we'll go ahead and start with a roll call vote with Board Member Sika.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
I think you're muted, Bryce, or we still can't hear you.
Maybe a thumbs up.
It's connection in Italy. He's home.
Yeah.
His phone's still used to the overseas coverage.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Well,
Bryce Williams, yes.
perfect. Thank you, Vice President Williams. That motion carries, and we'll go ahead and clear the room and enter our closed executive session. All right, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you again for joining us. We have a full agenda this evening with a lot of information and reports that the board is intrigued to hear where we're at right now. But before we do that, one, I'd just like to welcome everybody again. I also want to acknowledge our association presidents who are with us tonight. For our buildings and grounds, we have President Elia Ocampo. I don't see her here. I'm sure she's online. For child nutrition, we have President Tanya Slaughter. I know she's usually here. Maybe in the back there. In the back. Here. Hi, Tanya. For our Salt Lake Education Office Personnel Association, SLCSD, we have President Whitney Favre. For transportation, President Chris Krogh. And then for our SLEA Association, Salt Lake Education Association, we have President James Tobler and Vice President Mike Harmon. I see you both here. Thanks for joining us as always. And for the Salt Lake Association of School Administrators, SLASA, we have President Bree De Leon, who is not with us this evening, but we have a representative in Dr. Shante Broadway McDaniel. Thank you for joining us. Now we will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance, excuse me. And I've asked Logan Hall to lead us in the pledge this evening.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you so much for that. I do also want to acknowledge that Vice President Williams is joining us remotely, and Student Board Member Josiah had a family engagement and will not be joining us this evening. So thank you for that as well. Before I move on to the consent agenda, I had a brief statement that I would like to read. On the consent agenda is a memo from the district recommending that, in accordance with state law, the board provide 30 minutes of public comment in our 2 upcoming November board meetings, specifically dedicated to hearing stakeholder opinions and concerns regarding potential school closures and boundary adjustments. We are asking stakeholders to reach out to April Johnson, Administrative Assistant to the Superintendent, by phone to be placed on the public comment list. The district will be taking requests to speak 1 week prior to each of the November 7th and the November 20th board meetings? Is it the 30th?
Yes, that's right.
20th.
20th.
While the memo indicates that the November board meetings will be held at a location other than this boardroom, we believe that our current boardroom would be a better location for these board meetings. Accordingly, we'd like to move the memo from the consent agenda to the action agenda in order to potentially amend the memo and then vote on a final version. Will a board member please make that motion?
I move that the board approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 5, which shall be moved to the action agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. Any discussion to the motion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christie Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams,
Jenny
yes.
Sika, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
All right, that motion passes, and we'll revisit that on the action agenda when we get there. Let me just make a note to do that. All right, thank you, Board. Moving on, Superintendent, we have a couple of reports this evening. The first one being our fall enrollment review, yeah.
Yes, we do. Sam Quantz, our Director of IT and Data, will be giving us an enrollment update.
Thank you. We had to get creative on being able to show this on the screen and on Zoom with me not being back there. So I'm just getting off of a cold, so my voice still sounds a little crazy, so apologize for that. All board members and superintendent and business administrator Kersley, thank you for letting me be here with you. We sent out yesterday a copy of the spreadsheet that contains all of our October 1, our official counts for the year. We've changed the format on this a little bit. In the past, we had created PDF documents that were sent out. They became a little more cumbersome over the years, and they also created a lot of time. There was a lot of copying and pasting to put them in that format, and that would cause errors here and there in calculations. So I shifted it to this spreadsheet for a couple of reasons. Board member Kersley loves spreadsheets, and I wanted to...
And long presentations.
Yeah. And we would get requests for those PDFs to be in Excel format a lot of times. So the main difference when you're looking at these spreadsheets here is previously we had broken out the ELP programs or CNA programs on separate lines. We've now collapsed them under the school. So on the very first tab that you receive, there's an enrollment summary. And so if we went to Emerson, for example, and we could click on this, it's probably going to be, got it zoomed in here. Oh, hold on a second. Now we can open this up, and then you'll be able to expand that, and you'll be able to see the difference in the counts for the regular school program, which is just the neighborhood program, and their ELP program. And you can see the breakdown. For example, their total enrollment for October 1 was 462 students, with 100 of those students being ELP students. Yes.
If you're a user who does not use Excel, how do you do this?
If you're a user that doesn't use Excel,
Yeah, if you're using Numbers or like Google Drive, or when this is posted as an attachment and you don't use Excel, how does this utility work on another
it-
processor?
when we post it publicly, it'll be made available in a way that they can just navigate through that. To drill down, the drill down's pretty evident. There's a little plus symbol next to each school name, and as you click on that plus symbol, that will open it up. Yours may be protected, which may not let it open up right now. But for the board, we will have on our district document center a full public or a full non-public count. And the real difference between the public version and the non-public version is this is in alignment with our data governance plan. We don't release any information where the sample sizes or the n sizes are less than 10 in order to try and protect the identity of students. So for example, if someone spoke French at a school and there was one student, someone might know who that is. Right? So we'll be able to get that up there for them. So we also added this summary tab where we haven't had that in the past. The information was always contained in each individual report. So this one was just to make it easy for you to look at the school and what their different demographics percentages were. So you can look at, I'm just going to scroll down if you want to see the entire district. Our grand total, including charters, the enrollment was 19,756 with a 58.93% minority and then 33.74% English language learner or multi-language learner, 13.46%, and that is students with disabilities. Now that's a field we haven't placed on our reports before. We have indicated, and we'll look at this when we look at the enrollment by grade, that you can see our self-contained students because they're funded a little bit differently. Those are broken out into the counts, but students with disability, this percentage includes those who are self-contained as well as resource, to kind of give you a picture of how many students we're serving through that program. 3.3% homeless, 53.41% low income, and 28.25% non-English. And then the last column, so we've got the languages spreadsheet in here, but that report is always just kind of a bear to look at because we have so many languages. You have to have a ruler to go across the back and so forth. So we broke it down to just show you how many distinct languages other than English are spoken at each individual school. But the pivot table inside Excel doesn't like to summarize that very easily because we're looking at unique counts. So I just put off to the side that the total number of English languages other than English is 84 spoken in the district. And then the other tabs that are located on there are similar to the past. We have an enrollment by grade. There is the ELL report or MLL report. And then our homeless count breakdown and the individual living situations of each of those students. Our low income report, those who are on free or reduced lunch. An ethnicity breakdown. And then again, here is the languages, which you can see is a pretty busy report. And you can see all the different languages and how they sum up. Do you have any questions on those reports before I go into my analysis of that data? Okay. All right. I believe last year I presented this, but I wanted to remind everyone what our required reporting periods are. So October 1 focus on the enrollment or head counts of students. This will serve as an official head count, official enrollment and head count for the year. So from going forward, if anybody asks, what was your economic disadvantage or low income percentage? We'll use the October 1 percentage. What is your enrollment? We would use the October 1 enrollment, not as it fluctuates throughout the year. This is what USBE does as well, the State Board of Education. Then there's a December 1 reporting period, which focuses on special education. It also focuses a little bit on homeless and provides the official special education service report for the year. I wanted to scroll. And then July 1 is our cumulative report for the entire year. This is the one that generates the WPU for the district. It focuses on the average daily membership, which is the average enrollment for the year. So where October 1 is a strict head count of anybody who was enrolled on October 1st, the July 1 focuses on the average enrollment. So if you had a student that was enrolled for 10 days and a student that was enrolled for 5 days, the average enrollment for those two would be 7.5. Or yeah, did that right? Okay. All right. Some observations. So for Salt Lake City School District proper, the enrollment was 18,966. If you look at the report on when USBE releases that, you'll see 18,965. That was because we had one student who was incorrectly exited last year, and we needed to perform a historical exit change. And by the time we completed the October 1 report, the State Board of Education hadn't updated their side of the data yet. So I included that one student because they are enrolled. Last year we had 19,447. That's a 2.5% decrease this year from last year. The Salt Lake Center for Science and Education enrollment this year was 361 students. Last year was 342. That's a 5.6% increase. Open Classroom had 265 students enrolled. That's K-8. And last year they had 286 students enrolled. That's a 7.3% decrease. And Salt Lake School for the Performing Arts have 165 students enrolled, whereas last year they had 202 for an 18.3% decrease. Our Salt Lake District and charters, our district residents, out of those 19,767, 18,767 students were district residents, and 989 students come from other districts into our, or at least as they're coded. Some of those might include students that come from out of state too. Some significant enrollment changes from last year. Beacon Heights, if you look at their enrollment, they are down 14.04% from last year. Dilworth was down 16.23%. Hawthorne, 12.4%. Benyon, 10.86% down. Mary W. Jackson was down 13.14%. Liberty was down 18.62%. Newman was down 16.10%. Riley was down 13.84%. Clayton Middle School was down 12.16% overall, but their ELP program was up 79%. I looked into that one, so that's such a small number that's easy to change, easy to swing that number. So last year we had something like 89 students in the ELP program at Clayton. This year we have 150, and that's if those students were coded correctly in the system. And then the only school that really had any type of increase was Meadowlark with 5.93%. Every other school really focused right around a 1 or a 2% positive or negative change. Nothing really significant. As we look at grade levels, Kindergarten enrollment is down 5.8%. This is not uncommon. We've had fluctuations in kindergarten throughout the year. Sometimes we have a significant increase, sometimes we have a significant decrease. Just as kindergarten is really hard to project because we can't really use birth data for birth rate data to project that because Salt Lake County is pretty mobile. And when we're looking at that, it has it kind of as a county as opposed to just in Salt Lake City School District. Second grade enrollment was up 9.59%. So that was our last year's first graders that rolled up into second grade. Our fifth grade enrollment was up 7.11%, and sixth grade enrollment was down 6.25%, as well as eighth grade enrollment down 8.96%. Our 10th grade enrollment is up 6.72%, and our 12th grade enrollment is up 8%. Again, these are students that came from last year as well as new students. But what we want to look at that is we look at sixth grade and eighth grade specifically. Those are transition years, right? So the next year they're going to attend a secondary school or so a middle school or a high school. How will that decrease affect our next year's enrollment in those grades? As we've looked at the enrollment declines over the years, we've seen most of the declines in the elementary schools where middle and highs have stayed pretty steady. However, at some point, those declines are going to be felt in the middle and the high schools. And so seeing those two declines in sixth grade and eighth grade are possible indicators that we're going to see some of that next year in the ninth and the seventh grade. Okay, demographics, we went through this. These are some of the percentages that we have for this year for our schools. And just the comparison between last year. So for example, our multi-language learner last year was 27%, as opposed to this year it's 33%. So we have an increase in students who speak a primary language other than English. Our homeless population went up slightly. Our economic disadvantaged or low income went up slightly from last year. Our languages spoken went up slightly from last year. Minority was they're pretty much the same, our minority percentage, and our students with disabilities, we didn't have that listed from last year. I also included class size for this year. And this is kind of a challenging situation to look at because in our student information system, we have classes that are sometimes facilitating classes for groupings, for specific groupings, or to give a specific teacher access to student information. So they can skew the data. So what I did for elementary education, elementary average, is I just looked at homerooms. Homerooms are pretty indicative of that. And I didn't include in the homerooms the self-contained or essential elements classes because, again, those enrollment in those classes is small. And so they can skew the data. So this is meant to just kind of give you an overall of elementary. So the average homeroom for regular education in the Salt Lake District right currently is 16.7 students per class. The middle school average and the high school, I broke it out by subject because high school and middle school have a lot of sections that fill this, like a teacher aide, for example, where there's a student of one. So to average that would skew our regular class sizes. But everybody has to take language arts. Most students are in math, and most students are in some science class. So if we look at middle school language arts, 15.52 students in a language arts class on average. There's 20.03 students in the average math class, and in science there's 22.73. And in the high school, our language arts class size is 18.54. Our math classes are 22.88, and our science classes are 25.96. Those are my observations. Any questions?
Thank you, Sam, for presenting that. Before there's any questions from the board superintendent, is there anything that you wanted to add to the discussion? Board members, the floor is yours.
I have a question about the average.
Board member Anderson.
I have a question about the average class size, and if it's possible in the future to break that out in terms of like lower grade, middle grade, upper grade, or other ways to demonstrate it, because we know, as we've discussed amply, that some of our classes are quite small, but some of them end up being quite big, especially in 5th and 6th grade. And so it would be helpful to know, like, is that average really a useful number, or does it just show the, large disparity we have in class sizes overall?
Yeah.
Like, what would be any other observations you've made about class size that comes from this, or is it not really
Well,
able to be parsed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really is, the more granular you get, the better we're going to be able to look at what the class sizes are. So for example, the directive that we have, the board approved class size, target class size for K through 3 is 24, and for 4 through 6 is 28. And so if we look at 16.7, right, that's significantly less than 24. And so when we look at, for conversations like right-sizing classes, I think if you look at, is that 16.7 closer in our K through 3? Is that where we need to right-size? Or is it in our 4 through 6, or a combination of both? But that can be provided.
Sorry, the only other thing would be, and preschool is not collected in this table for state reporting purposes, but do we have preschool available given its role in the strategic plan? And will that be added in any way to the public-facing version?
Yeah, great question. So yes, we don't, in our official counts, preschool is not included in that because they're funded separately. However, I do have that data, and that can be provided.
Board member Sweat.
Thank you. Sam, thanks so much for the information. Superintendent, for some reason, I didn't get the email that had the enrollment data.
I just
So
forwarded that again.
Okay.
Did you happen to catch that?
let me look and see if it came through.
Okay.
I can look. What would be
Sorry about
helpful?
that.
That's okay. What would be helpful to me would be to have that previous 3 years included in a chart so that we'd be able to see, the ups and downs. I think that would be really helpful as we have those talking points. I always find that interesting to be able to see, if there's any trends, especially where you're already talking about the movement from our elementary to our middle up to our high, that we're going to be able to see that bubble probably come down just a little bit at the high schools, because the high schools have stayed pretty steady where we thought they were going to stay.
Yep.
Correct? I noticed that there was a bump in a couple of them, so that was of interest to me to be able to have that 3-year enrollment. If we could get that, that would be great. I appreciate, Sam, that you were just talking about the importance of how we fund FTE, because right now, when you look at these class sizes, then I don't think we are, but are we overstaffed in some of our schools? Alan?
Yeah, so the reason you see those numbers lower than our allocation, so we'll allocate based on the 25s and the 28s. But then like a Title I school can take Title I funds and increment their number of FTE, or discretionary money, which is allocated to all the schools. They can use that to also hire additional contract teachers and lower their class sizes as well.
Okay. So like Ashley, I think that the averages are really interesting, to be able to look at those. So I appreciate you breaking those out. And Ashley asked the question I wanted to ask too, is about preschool, because I think it's important, for us to have, that information if possible. So I think that right now, that's it for me.
Thank you, Board Member Sweat. Any other questions from the board? Okay. All right. Sam, thank you so much for joining us and for putting this information together, and we look forward to hearing and seeing your updates. Thank you. All right. All right. Up next, the second item on our reports agenda is a review of the 2022-2023 student end-of-year testing data and school report. Superintendent, would you like to introduce this, and who will be joining us this evening?
Yes, glad to have our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Tiffany Hall, and Dr. Michelle Amio to come up, and who is our Director of Assessment and master of all the data here. to present to us today.
Excellent. Thank you, Superintendent. Welcome, Dr. Hall. Welcome, Dr. Amio. Take it away.
Thanks. It is a pleasure to be here, and of course, it is always a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk about the things that our students have done and our teachers have worked on so hard over the previous school year. So last year, I was made quite a bit of fun of for the number of slides in this presentation.
That would never happen, Dr.
So I will just let you know that there are some slides that we will look at all of the data, including the disaggregated data, and there are some slides where it is a more holistic look at how we're evaluating student performance that we will, in this meeting, look at the aggregate data, but the disaggregated data is provided for you on the back of that sheet and will be posted online, so it will be part of the public copy. I just want to say that when you look at your packet and you see how thick it is, we will be out of here well before 10 p.m. So, just so we're clear. We are going to look at, in this report, we're going to come back to you with some other information as well, and I am going to figure out how to make this work in 1 second.
Am I blocking it?
There we go. So we're going to be looking at end-of-level assessments. We're going to be looking at some of our literacy assessments around our board literacy goal, our pathway indicators that are the board pathway indicators we've been looking at for several years as a wellness check for students, and we're going to look at some growth data. And this means that we're looking at a couple of different kinds of data. It is very possible for students to come into a grade level and not beyond grade level when they enter. This could be because they've had interrupted schooling, because they have had trauma, because they are acquiring English as a multiple language. There could be a lot of reasons for that. But when they come into school, we focus very hard on making sure that they make growth. And we set a trajectory for them that if they make that growth for 3 years, they should reach proficiency. And for some of those students, that's a very large amount of growth they have to make each year, and sometimes it might take 4 years for them to get there. But when they meet that growth, the idea is that they will then be proficient. So it is possible for a student to make their growth, but not yet be proficient. So we are moving them always toward proficiency. So these first assessments are end-of-level or proficiency assessments that show where a student is at the end of a grade level relative to that grade level. So with that explanation, I will turn it over to Dr. Amio to look at some data.
So I just wanted to add a little bit about the growth, if you don't mind. When we talk about growth data, we are looking at individual students, but for us as a school district, as a school, and then as grade levels, we look at that in terms of impact on the instruction and the processes in the school. So we're looking at that piece also as an indicator for how well we're doing with our programs. Okay. Whoops, I went backwards.
There you go.
All right, we'll start with end of level. Now these are, when we report these data, we include every test that was taken by all of our students. When they're reported through the data gateway, they remove students, so oftentimes our percentages will be a little bit lower than what's reported in the data gateway publicly, and then of course on the school report cards. To move this closer. So, oops, I didn't mean to do that. So these are our KEEP data. This is our entry and exit. The kindergarten entry is based on what students should be prepared with out of preschool. So there are two different tests. So we caution in comparing an entry and an exit as they measure different things. So we want to look at entry for our kindergartners and how well they are prepared for entrance, with literacy and math. And then the exit profile is actually based on the kindergarten standards. And you can see that we've got our ELA proficiency, it's actually literacy in kindergarten and numeracy for math. The state averages for literacy for the, let's see, for the entrance. Okay, I've got entrance.
for entrance was 58, and then the state average for literacy, the exit was 64. You can see we're at 54 and 60.
Well, but the math state average, and this is something that we see.
Give you that one.
Okay. Oh, were you going to do that one next?
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're actually a little stronger than the state in mathematics in kinder. So our entrance, of course, is 67. The state average entrance, state average for students in kindergarten is 75% of them are ready. Our exit, though, is 92% of our students are exiting considered proficient and ready for first grade, and the average at the state was 82, so we're actually 10 points above. That's quite good. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions about this test? Okay. So in all of our reporting that we do internally, and then for our cabinet and superintendent, we always disaggregate the data by 4 groups, specifically race, and then of course our 3 highly impacted groups that we're most interested in, which are low income, our MLL, and then of course our students with disabilities. These are the 3 groups that we are specifically looking at in closing achievement gaps. So when you hear Dr. Bundia talk about closing the gap, we're actually looking at these 3, and we're looking at these types of data. So when you look at this chart, I have to explain it for a minute. So if you look at the key proficiency low income and look at 2023 exit, what that is saying is that 43%, I believe it's 43%, 43% of the students that are identified as low income are proficient. The blue bar is the students, 80% of the students that are not identifying as low income are proficient. So that's what we're really interested in closing that. We're looking at comparable groups, and we want to see that all of our students are performing at the same level. So on ML, you can see that a lesser number, I believe that's 35% of our MLs are proficient. And then, of course, I think that's, what is that, 87?
67.
Sorry, 67% of our students that don't identify as ML. So that's how you read those charts, and this is how we present all of our data and disaggregate our data across the board. And then sometimes we'll disaggregate it by other things like gender, but this is a standard practice of how we report. Does anybody have any questions about how we report on this?
Michelle, so I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So let's just, if you look at students with disabilities, so when you look at the 2023, then the students who are not students with disabilities are 64% proficient. Is that right?
Yes.
And then only 33% of our students with disabilities are proficient.
Yes. So you don't want to add those two. It's just, they're 2 separate groups
Those are
comparing.
the 2 separate groups,
Yeah.
right?
Dr. Amio, do you have a laser pointer on there?
It won't
Yes.
reflect on the TV.
Oh,
It
yeah,
doesn't
no, it
reflect on the TV.
TV.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Vanna White.
Hey, Alan, could you? Okay. Okay. So everyone okay in terms of reading? Okay. So before, as we move on then, this is the kindergarten students disaggregated for exit, numeracy. You can see that we're quite a bit higher, but this one is interesting to Tiffany and I and Sandra, Dr. Buendia, because the gaps there are less than they are in the upper grades by subgroup. And so in the lower grades, K2, what we are seeing is that those gaps are small. And the focus of that practice and the work that we've been doing in teaching and learning with teachers, building capacity in those early grades, that started in 2019 and has been carried on through the pandemic. And we're actually seeing some of those gaps being closed. I guess it was 2017-18 with Peggy. So that work is evident in this data and with Holly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was
Board
Holly.
Member Anderson mentioned pre-K. And in 17-18, as Dr. Amio was mentioning, one of the things that we did was really push into our pre-K programs with our Eureka Math. And I think that we're really seeing the benefits of that strong academic preparation in pre-K that connects to our curriculum that we use K6 or K5 now across the board. And as we see that gap closing in kindergarten and math.
Yeah, the implementation, I forgot, it was Eureka, and that was really exciting for me. My background is in mathematics. Then best practices say that we need to use that CRE sequencing, and some teachers were a little bit uncomfortable with it. It was a little bit different than what they had been teaching, but this is one of those practices, much like the science of reading, that the evidence was quite clear that the way that we were teaching math wasn't quite working. So we have a lot of people that say, oh, I hate math, and I just say, oh, it's probably the instruction, because math is fantastic. But my point is that we really want to create students that are capable in literacy and math, and it really does start with the practice. So Eureka is a program that does implement and require teachers to implement that CRA, which is that concrete representational abstract, or an algorithm type practice for students. So it changes through the grade levels, but that's really, you can see it in the kindergarten right there as well. So this is our end of levels. We don't have a state, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ashley.
Okay. This similar question to what Christy was asking in terms of students with disabilities.
Okay.
Often, where do students who opt out or who don't complete a test, for instance, fall in this? Where, like, if I'm a student with a disability and I opt out of a certain subset of tests, but not all, that's going to show that the percentage is low. But how much can you account for the percentage from the ways in which a student or family may be engaging with testing, period? So like my own kids opt out of some of these tests.
Okay.
They count as a 0 on the test. They bring down the average for whatever subgroups that they're part of.
So that's
how
not
is that accounted
That's actually
for?
not how we calculate it. We only
Okay.
count the tests that were taken. So we wouldn't put a 0 in. That would actually be against state ethics policy too. So we don't do that. We wouldn't do that for any student. We do have to put in a 0 for participation though. So it does count against participation, but it doesn't count against these percentages that you're seeing. Again, these are all of our students that took a test, and we don't apply the state rules. We don't take students out. We include all of them. So that's every student that has a test.
That's
Yeah.
good to know. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Right, for in Salt Lake City School District, we give an end of level for first and second grade. It's an internal district test. We don't have a state test, so we don't have a district average comparison for this. These tests are based on our core standards, and they come out of teaching and learning. And these are our first and second grade end of levels. We do have these in place for a couple of reasons. One is so we can calculate growth internally over time for our teachers so they can see their impact on their students. And then also, of course, they want to see what their practice is for end of levels. So you can see the impact of our recovery year, and then it's starting to come back up. That's everything. Yeah. Let's see. All right, and then of course, this is the page that we're always more interested in and that our principals are interested in. And by the way, these are from our dashboards that all of our principals utilize to look at their data, and of course, cabinet and superintendent. So again, you can see that the gap is bigger in this with this test. Anything? Nope. Okay. Do you have any questions on this one? I'm going to wait till I look.
Okay, so that was ELA, and then our next one is math. So that's still the grades 1 and 2. Math disaggregated, and I think one of the things that we are also looking at, and we have talked with you on the board many times, is that 2020 year that we don't have data for, and we continue to see those bars marching back up to where they were, and that is in addition to the gaps that we're looking at. We're also really focused on that recovery of that unfinished learning. And it's been interesting for teachers and for us as we look at the data to kind of see where students will come and then all of a sudden there'll be a gap in that unfinished, in that learning that we need to help build up or scaffold. And so that is another thing as we look at these charts, that we're really paying attention to that trend data.
Yeah, so you can see that our subgroups that were impacted in 2021, the recovery year was considered to be the testing year 2021. And that was the year that we needed to examine closely to see what work we had to do for the next year. So we still have some work to do in first and second grade. All right, this is the state assessment, RISE, and it tests ELA, math, and science starting in fourth grade. ELA is 3 through 8, science is 4 through 8, and this is the required state assessment. You can see our averages over time, and then that's by year. The state average this past year for ELA was 44%. For math, it was 40.4, and science was 45% across the board, just all together 3 through 8. And then, of course, this is our disaggregated data. The gaps in this case are a little bit wider and more evident. So this is actually where we start to worry about our groups of kids that are students with disabilities, ML, and low income. And these are the places where we're looking for growth, and we're trying to not lose ground with those students. That's ELA. Okay. And then math has a similar pattern. We have quite a gap that we're looking at. And you can see that we had a gap pre-pandemic, not as great in some areas. And then for science, this starts in fourth grade. It's our fourth grade assessment for science through fourth through eighth grade. And then, of course, you can see the 4 groups. Do you have any questions about this test or the disaggregation of those data?
I'd just like to say a little bit about the science teaching. Science, for a long time, because it doesn't start until fourth grade, many, we just didn't even think about it or talk about it for many years for K1, 2, 3. You might do a science experiment. It might be kind of fun. You might make something explode. You might do a volcano or lava or something, but it wasn't taught systemically. And over the last 6 years, we have really worked with schools, elementary schools, and teachers in developing, through professional development, a strong understanding and approach to teaching science K1, 2, 3, so that when they take the test in the fourth grade year, it's not based on 6 months of science, it's based on several years of science education. And so we are beginning to see year by year that growth pay off. That actually is one of the things that came out in a positive way from our COVID year, because our science curriculum is actually an online program that we launched out the year that we were in remote. And so that has been really fun to work with teachers and really implement that now that we're back in person. So keep your eye on science. We're a mover and a shaker in that field. Okay. All right.
If I could just ask a question on the RISE grades. Well, when we're talking about the low income, so the blue and the red bars,
Yeah.
okay. As I am looking at those, it seems like, are we going down? Like with math, it's gone, to me, it's gone down a little bit. Science, it's gone up. I guess what I'm looking at is when you see these, I just want it to be that our trend is that we're moving up.
And we are with you. But what you'll notice is that we have 2018, so if I'm looking at science,
Okay.
our proficiency by low income. So 28, our students who were low income, 25% of them were proficient. And in 2019, 29% of them were proficient. Then you'll notice there's no test in 2020.
Right.
And in 2020, 2021, when, which we just lovingly refer to as our COVID year, nationally, everyone's trend line went down
Oh, I
through
understand
that.
that. I was in the
Yes.
classroom.
And, yeah, I know. And so you know how difficult that was. And so we do see that dip where we come back at 19%. That was the first tested year. That was the year in this district where we were tested after being in person for that last quarter. So kids came right back into school and almost immediately started testing because that's when the testing window
Right.
opened. And so that we do have a decline there. And so when we talk about finishing that learning and closing that COVID gap, that is getting the percentages and the proficiencies back up and continue with our upward trend. So in some places, we've made them up, and we're now continuing to go higher than we have before. And then in some grades and some subjects, we're still recovering.
Okay.
But our goal now is to keep that trend line going up from that 2021, from the 2021 school year, which is where we saw that dip.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, that is exactly where we have our eye.
And we feel the same way. We want to see it going up, so.
Okay.
Now, when we get to high school, we always know that this becomes, and middle school, sorry, can I say this?
Do it.
In middle school and high school, it becomes more difficult in some ways to make the same kinds of growth because students are in multiple classes with multiple teachers. They are more, the phrase is context heavy and more and content reduced in their subjects. In other words, we have classes that are more language dependent as students get older. And so when we're looking at issues with still finishing, catching students up with reading or writing or math, this is where any small growth for us is a terrific celebration. This is also why we say our most the richest field we have is elementary school. That is, if we can catch kids up in elementary school, we set them up for success in secondary. And so when we look at our high school data, I just want to remind you of the struggles that students have in navigating these, this time in their school career, and that these tests only capture a small part of what they're learning, what they're doing, and what they're experiencing through high school. As a former high school teacher, I always like to just shout out for the little extra difficulty that occurs as we look at this data.
Yeah, so I'll just give you the state averages to give you a little bit of context. So these are for 9th and 10th grade combined is what you're seeing here, and principals can certainly disaggregate it down to by grade level. The state average for ELA was 48%, and for math, the state average was 38. For science, it was 43, and reading, it was 48. So we did fall below the state average in our high schools. One thing I'd also like to add is one of the things we found with our high schoolers across the state, not unique to Salt Lake, is that this assessment is one that's a little bit, I want to say mushy, but that's the wrong technical term, for students because it doesn't have anything to do with their end, right? The graduation, a college career. So they're not, when they take it, we know this is across the state, not just Salt Lake District, that it's one of those tests that kids take because they're there. The state added in an ACT predictor, which has helped quite a bit to help increase those scores. Any questions on this one? It's okay? All right. And then, of course, we disaggregate. You can see that we have a large achievement gap for ML and students with disabilities, particularly in those two groups. This is ELA.
I have a question about the gap.
Yes.
Sorry, I scratched myself and I'm bleeding, which of course is embarrassing, but I'm fine. I just look odd.
Are you okay?
Okay. When we're looking at the MLL gap in the high school Aspire Plus, do we have any sense of how many students are like new versus have been in school for a long time? Does that make sense? Like, is there?
So when I wish I could show you the actual dashboard. There's filters on the side that help us identify like full academic year students that were enrolled. It helps us identify newcomers, and it can vet those out for our principals. And oftentimes, in this case, it would probably be an N size less than 10 for schools, things like that. So the principals, cabinet, superintendent, and all have access to that information in the dashboards. So we've just taken an aggregate.
So when we see the really large gap, there could be a lot of different factors impacting that at the secondary level, which would be distinct from elementary.
Yes,
Okay.
and so we hope that our principals can dig down into their data and make some decisions around what they're seeing as they do that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Board Member Jensen?
Would you like to talk about reading?
Okay,
Or do you want me to? Okay, go ahead.
this is a lot to digest. So I've been looking through it, and before we move on, because I'm thinking about elementary school, but then I'm also thinking about middle school and high school. So we had that disruption with COVID and all of that, and I mean, we've been talking about that. I don't see anything in here where it looks at ELL. And what my question is, have you found that there, because with that, I guess I would say breakdown that happened in COVID where students were online, and I mean, those ELL students, they weren't really getting a lot of support in ELL. I mean, we were, trying to get the core, subjects. So I guess what I'm wondering is, with them not getting that support that they needed in their English language development, could that be impacting how they're performing in their core classes? Because
Yes.
while they're in their
Absolutely,
core
yeah.
classes, they would, in a regular school, school year, they would be getting their ELL.
Right, no, absolutely, and that is also a really important thing to think about when we're looking at our Aspire Plus assessments, because it is not only looking at how well do they know the content, the grade level core content, but also their ability to access that in English and to read that and to do that in English. We're going to have some more data in the next section when we look at the reading data, where that's really been a focus for us to see if we can continue to improve the literacy pieces. But that is part of the issue with our Aspire Plus assessments and with the ACT predictor questions, because they are very literacy based.
They are, and
And-
so that's my concern.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, it's a valid concern, and it's they take the test kind of en masse, they take it online, so those things will figure in, and if we can,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, look through, and we see that in the reading, which actually is more focused on reading itself. Those are a little bit higher, but then when we come back to math, and again, the assessments are often context reduced, so they don't have a lot of context around the language, but very content specific or very content high. And so that is another thing that makes that a very difficult way. And again, we're looking here at proficiency, but you've put your finger on that problem of it's not just proficiency in the content, but facility in the language
Yeah.
to make that also happen. And it's not just our students who are developing English language fluency, but it could also be our students that we're working on because they may have a lower reading level.
Right,
And
yeah,
so we need
okay, yeah,
to also look at that. So, those are all issues, and it's why we say if we can get students in this district reading on grade level and staying on grade level, then we would expect to see the content scores increase as well, because reading is the gateway to that content.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
think
thank
that's
you.
critical.
It's a great question.
Just want to point out, so down here at the bottom of all these, so it's not listed as ELL, but MLL, which I believe is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, multi-language
Okay.
learner.
Kind of seeing that
Well, it
middle-
changes all the time.
Yes, it does, yes, and there's so many of them. So multi-language learner, to be respectful of the fact that many students come into this country already speaking French and Arabic, and then they pick up English, and then, so it's not as the second language, so we took out ESL, went to ELL, and then we went to multi-language learner, and then when we talk about the instruction, then that's ELD for English language development. And, next year it'll be something else. I'm waiting for one with a Q. Okay, let's take a look at ACT.
All right, so ACT is a mandated test across the state. It's not across the nation, but I still have the composite score for this past year. So the national composite score was 19.5. Our school district, our juniors this year, earned a 19.2. And typically over time, we've seen that their composite scores have generally matched the national trends on the ACT. I had a question about the ACT some time ago about how useful it is. The ACT is based on 32 years of longitudinal data. It's a predictor. It isn't an assessment to assess knowledge in core standards. So what it does is it tracks students through into college and cohorts. And then they basically determine how successful a student was in their freshman year in those 4 areas. They had to have earned a B or better. They go back to the ACT score, determine what that benchmark was for that cohort of students, and that's how those benchmarks for ACT are set. So this is actually a really good test for us to review to determine whether or not our students are on track for that first year in college. And you can see I've put the benchmark, the ACT benchmarks for this cohort year. Do you have any questions about this? And of course, we disaggregate as usual. This is the composite only. Our principals can take a look at it by each test, and then also by STEM. There's a STEM score in there as well. Again, we have some fairly large gaps, even though our composite score is hanging out pretty well with the average. So when we drill down, we still have some work to do, and that indicates that we still have ML students with disabilities that are not on track they're not predicted to do well their freshman year. So we're looking at those gaps. Those are the things that we're really focused on. Everything? Okay. All right. I'm going to let you talk about this.
All right, let's talk a little bit about our board literacy goal. This is a goal that the board charged us with and that we have been working toward. And of course, the goal was to implement and evaluate a system-wide course of action to ensure that all of our students graduate ready for college or career, and that we were going to increase the percentage of students who are proficient by 3% each year, and we were going to ask all of our schools to reach 95%. Well, we had the goal first, and then the state came in behind us for Acadians in grades K through 3, but in our district, we also do this using a different test. Last year, it was called Reading Inventory, has been. The name has changed this year, but we're continuing to look at the same thing in grades 4 through 12. This is a very unique opportunity because it's also the only standardized assessment that we have that gives us data about students in grade 12, since all of our state-required assessment ends in grade 11. So we're going to move into the state-required Acadians reading. Now, the first ones, these are looking at proficiency. And what you have here are 3 different tests, beginning, mid, and end of year. So for every year except 2020, because we didn't have an end of year test there, we have those 3 different windows of testing. And we do that so that we can kind of track that growth and see where students are. So students who are blue are above, and then green are at grade level. So blue and green are at or above grade level, but Dr. Maloof and I were here a few weeks ago, and we promised you at that time, because you asked for our disaggregated data, and we said we'd bring it to you tonight. Here it is. But, she reminded us that we are really looking now to have students solidly in blue, because if they are in blue, if they are that above grade level, then they have the greatest chance of staying there. So we used to celebrate, well, we still celebrate green and blue, but really now we want to be a blue district. We want to have a blue Christmas, we want to have we don't want a blue Christmas, but we want blue readers. So what I look at here when I think about the trend data is, if you look at our students who are well below grade level, we want to see that trending down from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So last year, if we look at our overall composite for grades K through 3, you'll see that we started with 32% of our students reading significantly below or well below grade level, and that was reduced to 25% by the end of the year. Well, that's still 1 in 4 students reading below grade level in grades K1, 2, 3. So that is an area that we continue to work on. But if you'll notice, we are also reducing that number and increasing the number of our students as we are picking up and really focusing on that piece. So we're excited to see, as we continue to implement our science of reading with our letters training, what that will look like. When we look at our disaggregated data for this section, you'll notice that while, of course, we still have gaps, we are doing some good work in bringing some of our, on the top where we have our academic proficiency by race, you'll notice that some of those gaps are closing. We're very excited to see that. You'll notice that there has been an 8-point since we came back in spring of 2021. If we look at our Pacific Islander students, that's our pink bar, you'll notice that we've had a steady increase there. That's been an area of focus for us, and that is very substantial, from 47% 2 years ago to 62%, so that is a statistically significant growth piece. We are, for our low-income MLL and students with disabilities, continuing to want to close that gap, but we are trending back up from where we were before the COVID year. So, yeah, please.
Okay. Acadians and reading inventory, I mean, I've done those, and I just want to ask, when you're administering those tests, a lot of times the reading that they are asked to do, it's not going to give an accurate assessment, because they're reading a passage about flying on an airplane. There are certain groups that know how things work when you fly on an airplane. And then there are lots of these other groups that have never had that experience. So this is one of the frustrations that I had as an educator is, okay, we're doing this assessment, but what we're asking them to read is biased. Mm-hmm. Getting on an airplane, going surfing at the ocean. I mean, I can give countless examples. Skiing. Mm-hmm. I don't understand when we are paying for these sorts of programs why they aren't considering the content of what the student is supposed to read and the impact that will have on the assessment.
And I know that Dr. Amio and also Dr. Parsons have had this conversation at length around the context and the experience of students as they come to different things and as they read those. If you get a prompt about skiing and you're an avid skier, you have a lot of cultural context around that that can help you figure out a word that you may not know, or be able to come up with a contextual understanding that helps you bridge that gap. And we know that that is a piece across the board. It's one of the things that we try to do every year in selecting reading programs and different prompts and experiences to help students develop that vocabulary and develop an understanding of what those things look at and look like. I don't know that we have a terrific solution for that, although we continue.
So the state is currently requesting teachers and educators to, this is a state assessment, we don't purchase it, it's just part of our testing suite that we have to provide to our students. But currently I can say that there is some work that's ongoing right now where they're requesting teachers from all places across the state to participate in this very thing. So maybe you could.
Yeah, the surfing example is particularly poignant.
Yeah.
You know, we're a landlocked state.
So
and
that
from my
doesn't-
But there have been surfing readings.
Yes, oh, I know.
No, there have been.
And I guess for me, it's not just frustrating, it's discouraging to, well, especially to Title I teachers, because in many situations, their students are at a disadvantage.
Yeah, they are. That's why we look at low income as one of our main groups. We know that there's a lot of factors that go into that, and that is the work. That's part of the work that we have to do in our schools, so acknowledged.
Well, and I was going to say this later, but it makes sense based on what Brian was adding, that like in past meetings, I've used this metaphor of a thermometer where a lot of the disparities we see here are not uncommon. And if I had a baby whose temperature was 105 degrees and I took their temperature and I said, well, you don't really feel warm, but that's alarmingly high. I'm going to give you Tylenol or Advil. And then in an hour, they still didn't feel warm and the temperature was still 105. I would think that the thermometer was broken and not the baby, right? So, and then there's some areas here where we see interesting disparity, like Pacific Islander students in one of the tests are higher in science and math than they are in reading, but you have to be able to read to participate in the test in science and math. So I guess it's not, as you point out, these are tests that you either have to give by the state or they're made available based on state contracts, that we don't create in-house tests for students, which, you know, that's a whole other discussion. But maybe you could talk about how, knowing that this is part of a national scope of topics and trends, there used to be this idea that testing would intervene on what was happening in a classroom, school, or district, and now it's about intervening on a student often. So what that means sometimes is, like when I'm teaching dance, if you have to do resource and ELD, you don't get to do dance because it competes with both of those required special times, rotations, right? So when we're looking at all of this, maybe it's helpful based on Brian's concerns or my concerns to consider how does it fit into the strategic plan overall as only one tool that we're using, knowing that it's an imperfect tool, but it does still give us a lot of very reasonable information. So maybe that's what we could address.
No, I agree, and I think we have things like our Seal of Civic Readiness, which is completely not test dependent, as a way of looking at what are we doing with that whole child. We have our pathway indicators, some of those push in different ways, and I think that's an excellent question as we look at how are we, you know, what is it that we're saying makes a student successful, and how do we intervene and provide that worldview and that context. And that's also a part of our career and college readiness path, helping students see things that they may not be running into their daily life. And, you know, I'm always sad to hear that a student hasn't gone to dance because they've had to go to resource, you know, and that's unfortunately a scheduling nightmare, but it is one of those things that provides student experiences. President Salazar, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to save this for later too, but I know I brought it up in other discussions around testing just in general, whether that's in general or ELP or kind of what we're up against now with the state requirements that we have, and that's testing bias. Knowing that there are discrepancies for communities of color and our white students, and how those tests are, one, developed and how they're studied, and
Who develops them?
And then how they're administered. And I'm wondering if there are discussions in that ongoing group that you mentioned, Dr. Amio, that are focusing on that and thinking about how we tailor testing to accommodate for those discrepancies.
Yeah, I think that that's an ongoing conversation at the state. Very, very much aware of it. This specific one is around literacy. So hopefully we will get that moving because I that I agree with you wholly on this one.
And the idea of culturally relevant passages and culturally relevant instruction is a piece and it's also a piece that we use when we purchase our curriculum materials so that we can begin to say, okay, are we covering all of these contexts that may come up in this?
Yeah, and the word bias was specific in the message out to teachers. They're looking for that specifically to address that and looking for cultural relevant pieces. So hopefully we can change that.
Yeah. Board Member Sweat? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to acknowledge it. You're supposed to.
I want to preface my remarks by saying that I just so appreciate the work that you do, and the information that you've brought us tonight. I'm trying not to be depressed because I think that, what Nate is saying is the same thing that we've been saying for a super long time. And it's not changing. The gaps are still as big as they were. And it's really hard, to look at this and not feel as though, and I mean, I'm trying to do some numbers and I look at this on the Arcadians K through 3 reading and I can see that there's a 6% growth, but it still isn't where we need it to be. And I'm thinking, okay, what are we not doing? Because we're still saying the same thing, Nate. I mean, it's no different. And I feel like I've been saying it for 20 years. The gap is too big. So what do we do? I understand, that there's disparity. I understand that the tests, aren't culturally relevant, at times, and that also our kids that are in those bottom red and blue bars right there, are the ones that you want to vet out and watch. But I also feel like I'm not really hearing, and maybe it's a little bit further back in here, what are we going to do?
Right.
What are we going to do to narrow the gap?
Right.
Because I feel as though that I've been standing in the gap for so long, and it's not narrowing.
Right.
I don't know what to do.
So I think there are two things to look at. And first, as we look at our gap, and this isn't a complete answer to what you're saying, but you'll also notice that the gap is a moving target.
Right.
As blue goes up, red goes up.
Right.
So as, we're continuing to move forward because we never want to say that to close a gap, we don't want another group to grow.
Right.
So we have to also always consider that. Especially with reading and especially with K3, this is one of the areas, and again, nationally, that has been an issue with making sure students can read. And that's, let's just take test bias, let's take the context of the prompts out of it. The question is, are we getting students prepared to read? And I think that the state took a very hard stance when they said every teacher in this state, following the example of Mississippi, is going to take letters training. And we took a hard line on that in this district in making sure that teachers had time to do that and that they were able to finish their training together, and they're working on that. We are continuing to take a line on that students or teachers in K3 that come into our district will be letters certified. And I appreciate the work of school leadership and performance in working with us to make sure that our principals are continuing to be aware of and monitor for those strong literacy practices. So this is the first year that we have we have the majority of our K3 teachers through that letters training, and that they're really working to implement, Dr. Maloof would want me to say this, not that it's letters, but they're really using instruction that is based on the science of reading. And the hope to that is that as we develop those specific skills in all teachers, specifically around the phonics piece, and Board Member Jensen last time pointed out that we have two programs, and we do have two programs, the Wonders and the 95% group, because that explicit instruction in phonics is one of the key evidence-based strategies for us to have in grades K through 3. And it has not been implemented evenly throughout our district. So our hope at this point, not our hope isn't a course of action. our course of action at this point is that we will have students who are experiencing phonics instruction with the 95% group materials consistently throughout K through 3 in all of our schools, and that comprehension instruction around our grade level materials will be supported by appropriate differentiation and scaffolding using the science of reading instructional strategies. So we have really, because I'm with you, you know, I feel like for a long time we've just been like, let's hope there's more blue this year. Let's hope there's more blue this year. And part of that was developing the professional development and the materials that work with that. Over the last, this is just a statistic I looked up this morning, but over the last 10 days, we have had over 300 hours of planning around the science of reading instruction happening in schools, supported by our content area specialists, who are literacy specialists. They have done over 30 hours of 60 hours of modeling and 90 hours of co-teaching with teachers in K-3. So we also continue, because I know this is something as a former teacher, Board Member Jensen is always concerned about, we are continuing not only to support by looking for it, but also from the classroom with job embedded support to make sure that we're implementing with consistency and fidelity across the district. This is a non-negotiable for us. K-3 reading is, this is the thing that we are the most concerned about in the district, and we have.
I appreciate you saying that, Dr. Hall, and taking us through that. I do, and I think that the commitment that we had as a board with the letters training was important. You know, that you came to us, we talked about that, you know, we implemented that. And so you're right, you know, we have to be able to have, you know, to be able to look at the data over a course of, you know, so many years to be able to see that narrow. For me, I think I heard you say that a majority, not 100% of our teachers doing letters? When you said majority of them were
I'm
trained.
sorry. Well, because we had some teachers, so 2 years ago,
Right.
everybody started, and then last year finished, but we hired some teachers last year,
Okay.
so they're in year 2.
So they're in year
We
2.
hired some teachers this year. They just, the superintendent reported on that last board meeting.
Right.
They've started into their
It's gonna be
one.
something that
So
they're
we
always
are-
working.
We are rolling that.
Okay. And so
that we will.
my last question is, and I'm sure it's probably right that they are, but are the coaches also involved in the training?
In
The reading
fact,
coaches?
Our reading coaches are, in many cases, the instructors.
So they're
for
the
both
instructors
our
for-
district and other districts.
Okay.
So they have all completed, most of them completed it before we started it, so that they could be that expert in the field that can do that. So yes, unequivocally, every one of our literacy coaches have finished this training.
Thank you.
And I have something to add, because you asked a question, and how you feel, I'm reporting this every year.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. One of the things that is new is this, with purpose, has been put in the strategic plan. So you know that we have individual leaders that have a large capacity for change, but they're not everywhere.
They're not everywhere.
And so just like increasing our teacher capacity in instruction and using the right practice, that is exactly what Dr. Buendia is doing with her work. So we're asking our leaders to increase their capacity so they can help identify in their school at the site what the issue is.
What the issue is.
So you know, when I was at a certain school, and what those issues were, it was because we looked at things. So we had to, so part of this equity audit piece that we're going to ask all of our school leaders to participate in, and we'll support them if they need help. We're going to ask them to look at perception data. We're going to ask them to look at their student demographic in conjunction with perception data, and that goes for teachers. How do teachers see their students? How do students see themselves in there? We're going to be looking at achievement, and we got to look at processes. So part of the issue with increasing teacher capacity in this district has been the process. We've actually had barriers sometimes put in place in that we haven't been able to train all of our teachers systematically or had enough support, so now we do, but now we need to actually work with our principals, and that's new, Christy, so I'm sorry, Board Member Sweat,
No.
for us to put that across all of our schools, So initially, and I'm sure that Dr. Mundia shared this with you, this year we've asked our principals to do a self-assessment of their schools, and just to give them an idea of where they need to look at their information. So we're looking at what their inputs are, what is the process, what do people think of us, and then what's that output, and how is it all related? And there isn't a rubric for leaders, but there is a system in place that they can use. It's research-based, and we know it works. So when we have leaders that engage in that practice, and they engage in a inquiry process as part of their practice all the time, and we're increasing teacher capacity the way we have been, we actually might move the dial, right? And that to me is, I feel the same way that you do.
And let's go to growth.
Let's go to growth. Anyway, I
Because
want to
growth,
tell you
as I
that
said,
that's-
proficiency, and I'm also trying to be very mindful of time. I realize that we have, please.
I'm sorry I'm going to push my timer here.
No,
but
go back.
I was going to save this till the end too, but since we're kind of on this topic of what are we going to do about it, I'm really glad that you asked that question, Board Member Sweat, because I think that's some of the value that we have right now as a board and as a district to really look at and study these things, and figure out what we're learning in these assessments at the site level, what the barriers are, what the funding gaps are. I mean, I want to know all of the things that this board can do and implement, either through more financing, through better policies, through more specific coordination from the board through the superintendent down to the classroom, about what is going to really move the needle. And that's what I really identify our study sessions being when we get there. I think this is a good baseline for us. It is hard to see some of the data, but I think there's a lot of factors, as we've talked about. I'm definitely not going to say our system's broken, but what do we do to enhance the opportunities that we have?
We don't want to ever normalize large groups of students failing either. So we don't ever want to say, oh, we hit the state average, cool, because the state average is below 50, right? So that's sort of why we always want to have that sense of urgency, that's what you're talking about. So the how-to and the roadmap is the piece that we're going to implement with the strategic plan.
Yeah.
So,
Board Member.
Yeah, just like a quick, first of all, thank you. I know it's a lot of work to get this. So, yeah, I've been packing it inside for a while now, with disadvantaged students. I mean, I've been here in the board for close to 4 years now, and taking away COVID, and it is very drastic to see that still our marginalized, our BIPOC community are still the victim. And they are the victim. It's because of a school system nationwide, or worldwide. It is a system that's built by white, and it's meant to advantage the white. And unfortunately, when we get the BIPOC community in there, they struggle because the systems are not built for them. And that is the sad reality we are dealing with. And so, it is sad to see this stuff. But my question is, do we have a set target for next year to work towards? Yeah. So, and that's what I would like to know, and how we came out about how did we come.
okay, so this is a great question. Our goal that is set for us by the state is that 70% of our readers, our students, K-3, have to be on grade level by 2027. So every year, we are looking at our own growth toward proficiency to meet that goal. We have also said that by 2029, at the end of the strategic plan, that we would like to hit 80% because we'd like to stretch that goal. So both of those goals are, one is a state, one is a personal, and so we are making that growth. That means that we need to make, and that is what the first slide said, we need to make at least, to make our state goal, 3% growth per year. But to make our district goal, we need to make about 5% growth per year. So those are our goals. But what I what I would like to say is that even though there are a lot of issues with tests and testing, it is our responsibility to make sure that students are prepared to do those things. So I'd like to go back to what I said at the beginning, where we talked about the difference between proficiency and growth, because proficiency means that I'm already at grade level. But many of our students enter and they are not at grade level. They could be at grade level in Spanish, but they're not at grade level in English because they don't have that grade level of English yet. I didn't say that very well, and Monty will be mad at me tomorrow, but that's, that's a way of looking at it. So that is why I really like to look at our pathways of progress when we look at our Acadience data, because that is how we know if our students are on that positive trajectory to reach grade level proficiency. Because we look at that piece and we say, if you stay on grade level, or if you continue to make your growth over 3 years, you should end up at grade level. Now, sometimes if they start in second grade, that might be second grade, third grade, fourth grade. They don't show up on this data. If it's kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they'll show up on this data. So that's another piece that complicates things is, when do they come and when do they begin with us so that we get our baseline rating. But when we look at this, here we have a true rainbow. We have purple, blue, and green, and then yellow and red. And what this shows is our students and whether or not they are making progress at or above the level we would expect them to. And so that purple, and if you would take a look at 2023, this is the middle and end. Last year, more than 23% of our students made well above the growth that we would expect them to make in a year. When Dr. Amio talks about teacher capacity and leader capacity, this is an example of what that looks like. These are students that are not just making normal growth, they are making more than. The blue, the next 21% there, finished the year, 21% of our students made above typical growth. And then we had 22% of them making typical growth. That is over 60% of our students, math not being my strong suit, I'll just make an average, 65, thank you, Dr. Amio, 66, somewhere in there. A lot of our students, more than 60% of our students, made above that growth. As we continue to have that many students make the typical above or well above growth, we will begin to see that ripple out into our proficiency over time. And, students are children, and we can't expect them to make up everything in 1 year. We have to understand that they have a capacity to learn and that they will get tired and they do that. But I think that is, when I look at this, I think these are numbers that are indicative of systems being in place. They are indicative of our administrators being aware of and watching for that growth, and our teachers and our parents working to support students in making that. When we look at our disaggregated data for this,
I just would remind them about the impact,
please.
So just to remind you about, when we look at growth, it's also an indicator of the impact that a teacher has or a school or a grade level is having or a district on a student. So that's why this is an important graphic for us, because it does show that we have, 66% of our students had hit their growth target as calculated by Acadience. And this disaggregated piece is really nice to look at because we can see that we actually are closing the gap. And when we say closing the gap, we're actually talking about progress. So these are the percentages of students that hit their targets by the groups that we want to look at. So Board Member Sweat, this means we are making impact, and those letter trainings are working, and we've had teachers have 100% growth, or students, 100% of their students hit their growth target. So there's that.
Thank you. That really is the key piece, is what is that ongoing impact. And I love this chart because the gaps are much smaller here. And that says a lot, especially in our low income, about the very hard work that our teachers and administrators in our Title I schools are doing. So, yes.
Thank you for recognizing the hard work that, I mean, I think that all teachers are doing.
Absolutely.
But I think that Title I teachers, they have some additional challenges. For me, when I look at this, this is exciting because it shows me that, okay, that letters that you're talking about is seeing success. But that phonics part that I have talked about, and I think that the phonics part is a really critical piece. And I just hope that we are making sure that in our student achievement plans and the way that we are trying to accomplish all of this, that we are making sure that the teacher has enough minutes in the day to get the phonics piece taken care of. And I don't know how all of that works, you know, when you're in your district planning, but it's challenging as a teacher when you're given more and more things, and I mean, you end up prioritizing. That's what you do. And I hope that there's time
We
for
do
the
too.
phonics piece.
We do too, because that will make a difference.
I think it'll make it.
But it all makes a difference. I mean,
Oh,
it all makes a difference.
Yeah, it all makes
You
a
know,
difference.
don't get me
but-
started on the, year-round school. No, all right, let's,
And I guess I would just interject one more thing, and I know that we're trying to, time-wise, there are so many things, though, that go into getting the scores that the district wants, that the state wants, and it creates a dilemma for teachers as well. Because I'll give you an example here. Let's look over, okay, if you go back to that prior slide. So we've got those three, this slide right here. Okay, so we've got those three, the purple, the blue, and the green. I mean, I know these colors really well. Of course you want your children, you know, in the greens, the blues, and the purples. I can tell you one of the things that ends up happening with teachers is because what they have to do is they have to increase their scores. So, okay, you start looking at the child in yellow, the top child in yellow.
bubble.
Okay, that's the one that you're going to give your most, well, not most, but you are going to take care of that child because that'll get them to green. I'm just telling you the reality
Yeah, we know.
of what happens here.
Yeah.
So the child that's down in red, I mean, the teacher is still working with that child. Of course they are. I'm just telling you what happens here in reality when you start doing this all based on a test result. The teacher has to say, okay,
you want to say
what
anything
I've
about
got
the
to do.
bottom 25%?
I just want to say something about that. So that's an interesting, in my mind, how I want to examine that, because now I want to take that bottom 19% and look at their growth. And maybe we can send it back to you, and maybe we'll have the answer that they met their growth. And maybe that would say maybe the letters trainings is happening, but we acknowledge that. We're both educators. We know that there's a push for teachers sometimes to push the one or two kids over, and it happens, it does happen, but I'm now interested in looking at that lower band just to see. So I think I'll do that, and then maybe Tiffany can bring that back to you, and we can,
Thank you.
hopefully
I
that
mean,
will.
And I don't want it to be that I'm saying that a teacher is bad when, the teachers
It's
are under
strategic.
all of these
Yeah.
pressures, and they're
Yeah,
strategically trying
definitely.
to do these things. So we build these things into a system that creates some problems.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, well,
Okay.
okay, let's talk about 4 through 12. Again, with the reading inventory, we don't have the same assessment all the way K-12. That would be nice. This is another one. But as we look at this, we are able to see that we are continuing to hopefully increase the number of our students who are advanced readers and decrease the numbers that are below basic. And you know, that becomes, when we reach 4 through 12, in light of this conversation, you can read the data yourself, and I'll just talk a little bit about the things that we are doing. We do have several schools who also extended their science of reading instruction and their letters training through grades 4 through 6. While it wasn't exactly built for that, the principles are still there. Because when we do have, as Board Member Jensen has pointed out, a student who comes into 4th grade not proficient, very often the ability or the emphasis in that 4th grade classroom isn't to stop and to look at reading, because we're doing more content. We're looking at more science. Science is tested this year. So we're also really looking at how do we build literacy skills through our content area reading, because we have to do content. We have to stay on grade level. We know that, because otherwise we open up wider systemic gaps in content knowledge. And so we will continue to work with a couple of different models in our 4 through 12, and you'll notice that we have given you the disaggregated data for the district, and then I have 3 pages here that will allow you to look at some specific differences in 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12 that we aren't going to show tonight, but that data is there. And I know that Dr. Amio will be looking at our red students across the board with a little more interest going
Now
forward.
you've raised a question, and now I'm interested in analyzing that, so I will take a look. All right, these are our pathway indicators. These are your board pathway indicators. And these were written, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, based on research on what we know about students along their educational pathways. And I like to explain this to people that it's like a well check. If you've ever taken a child to a pediatrician for those, we check for certain indicators. So these are indicators that are research-based that we know point to the wellness or academic wellness of a student. And we have 7 of them. The 7th indicator is our post-secondary education pathway indicator, and it tells us how our students are doing in post-secondary education.
So as these are wellness checks over time, one of the things that is different about these assessments is that they will often combine a couple of different things. So as opposed to looking at cadence or rise, which is very discrete around a content area or a skill, these will be together. And you'll see on this slide, we've kind of put our little indicators where we're looking at students. We look at students in kindergarten, at the end of grade 3, at the end of elementary school in our district right now, that's 5th or 6th grade, at the end of middle school, and then as they get into high school. And so up here we have blue indicators. You'll notice that I put a time clock over our MLL. That's our WIDA data. We'll bring that to you in our next report, as we're still finalizing some data and making sure that that's accurate, as we've had a new change in our state technical manual. Thank you. And then our secondary is our green. And the other thing that I wanted to just remind you is that as we moved into our secondary piece, we also added some social and emotional check-ins. These are really indicators, again, about the whole child. So this conversation we've been having about, what's the 1 child or the 2%? As we look at these, they really do say, are we holistically preparing kids to move to the next level? And as we look at this data, you'll notice this is one of the fabulous things that Dr. Amio's team has done. There will be a green line across the top of the bars. That is our district average. We are not going to look at the disaggregated data for these slides, but when you look at them on the reverse of this slide, you'll notice that green line showing the district average is still there. So, wellness check. Do you want to talk about them, or do you want
I can talk about them,
Okay.
yeah, sure. Let's see which one we're on. So this is our kindergarten check-in. We want to know if students are exiting kindergarten ready for 1st grade. We have business rules that we create, and I have to say sometimes I think they're more rigorous than we want them to be, but this is straightforward. This is our kindergarten assessment. So you can see that our students, mostly in math, are exiting ready for 1st grade, and then of course the literacy indicator, and that is the same as earlier. The next, I like this wellness check conversation. It's a good way to couch these pathway indicators. The next one that we know about is that we need third graders, and all of you know this, we need them to be reading and writing on grade level. That's just imperative. All research says that this is the critical piece. We did a study years ago. Our data, internal data, matched the national data that yes, indeed, if our students, especially in subgroups of students, particularly low income, have higher rates of graduation compared to those students who are not reading on grade level. So this is a really important one. This is that indicator. So the next check along the pathway is our indicator 3A, and that is exiting elementary on grade level. So in our district, we have some elementary schools that end at 5th grade. So this includes some 5th grade and some 6th grade. And the indicator there that's being measured is in gray. And then the pieces that we include in the business rules are in the green, yellow, and blue. And then you can read that there are the business rules just underneath, so you can see how we measure those. And then again, principals have, what we ask principals to do is take a look at this at the beginning of their school year, look at their growth, their 5-year growth reports, and then go into their end-of-level stuff. So this is giving them a broad idea of what they have. Now, on these reports, we also can do a subgroup analysis or a gap analysis, what we really want to call it, and drill down further. So principals have that access. The next piece of this is exiting middle school. So for us, that's our 8th graders, and we want them to be proficient in all 3 subject areas. Again, the gray is measuring all 3, and then, of course, each of those areas broken out. Any questions so far? All right, and then indicator 4B this is where we start to ask questions about their well-being, the whole child piece. We want to know about their habits. We want to know how they feel about it, how they see themselves in school, attendance, and we use grade point average for that as well. So this indicator is developing effective student behaviors and habits, and you can see that the business rules are there underneath. We're looking at attendance. We're looking at 90% attendance in core classes and a cumulative GPA in those core classes of a or a cumulative GPA of 7th and 8th grade of all their classes, 2.75. And then you can see those 2 broken out. And then 9th grade, so we know in 9th grade that there are many factors that are a predictor for graduation and success later in their junior and senior year. For this particular indicator, it's exiting 9th grade in language arts and math and science, and we used Utah Aspire Plus to measure that piece. So you have all 4 sections. We also want to know a little bit more about our 9th graders as they're exiting 9th grade and entering into 10th grade. Most of you know that 9th grade year is really critical for students that may be at risk for dropping out or not completing. So we do look, these indicators are really important for our high school principals. They take a look at this stuff and they want to know credits earned. They want to know how many students have failed or earned credits, attendance. And then, of course, let's see, yep, that's it for that one. So those are really good predictors for success. The next check for us is our exiting grade 11 on grade level. Again, we're using this one, we're using the attendance. We're looking at 90% or higher in all core classes. We're looking for a GPA at that point of a 2.0 or higher. We're looking for 18 credits earned at this point, including then, of course, the credits that are needed for graduation. And then we're looking for the benchmark scores for ACT. So this is kind of a rigorous well check for 11th grade, but it's reality. This is what we're looking at. So you can see the percentage of students that met all of those indicators is below 20 across the board. Well, it's at 20 and 21. With, of course, our attendance is the highest place that we're looking at. The greatest, it's actually GPA. We're looking at demonstrating STEM competencies as well. And we're using the ACT science tests for that piece and math benchmarks. Indicator 6C is exiting grade 11 prepared for post-secondary school or training. So we're looking at, we are looking at earned a 21 or higher on the ACT by school year. We're looking at the percentage of students who earned at least 2 CTE credits by school year, and then by each school year, and then those who earned at least one full credit in an advanced course.
Can I say, while we're looking at the STEM competencies, that this would be a good kind of crosswalk between what we were talking about, where we assess science when we're required to or when we want to, but we don't keep track of things such as how many schools have students participating in a science fair. And there's a huge inequity in who participates in science fairs, in part because of the amount of interventions at tests that happen at certain schools. So I'd say that this specific area is one place where it'd be interesting to entertain some other areas of data that we have, such as how do students engage in STEM, period, outside of assessment, that may make the most meaningful difference.
I appreciate that, and I know that Candace Penrod, our science supervisor, has been very proactive in pushing in STEM activities, starting in elementary school, and really working to, we think the science fair is a critical piece to that. How do we make sure that all schools are participating? And we've been really moving toward making that less of a, maybe my school does it, maybe they don't, and everybody in the class does it as well, because you're absolutely right. That's a gap in opportunity.
So these are your board pathways, and the business rules are also yours. So if that's something that you would like added to those business rules, and I certainly can collect that data. And I believe we do track who participates in science fairs. I just don't have it in a dashboard, so we can. I'm sure that we have that.
We have that.
And then also, I think I heard you say that that there's some barriers to accessing the science fairs for some students, and that would be another piece that you'd like to. Okay.
Yeah. And
Like in an instance where parents run it versus faculty, right? That would make a difference in that would be an example of a barrier. And if you lose a faculty member who's the person who's done it for many years, that would be another barrier.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's also hard when you have a science fair and a history fair, but maybe you only have one teacher at the grade level. And so that teacher says, I'm not going to run both. I like history better. I'm going to run the history fair. So we really are looking at all of those pieces to, again, increase those opportunities for every student across the board.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
All right, each year we start the school year off with our student growth percentile. This is a sample school report. Our principals demand these from me before I can get them to them fast enough. So what we do is we pull the assessment achievement data down from the state, and we run our internal calculations as soon as we get them. So we get these data sometime in the second week in July, and we are running the growth calculations for every school, and then printing these by the time they get to our administrative institute, and it's a really, really crazy time for us. But these reports are really important for our principals. They want to see them. They're good for principals that are currently seated in a school, but also for any of our new principals. It gives them an idea of how well their school is doing. So this is just an example of a school that we have. The red line in that bar graph there is proficiency. The bar graph is growth. We're looking for growth that's over that median line, that middle line of, it's like 45%. We actually applaud teachers who can hit at least 65% of their students, move at least 65% of their students, but we really honor the teachers that are moving at least 85% of their students. And so this is one of those pieces around growth that we talk about in terms of the impact that a school has had on their school community and then grade levels. We provide this for each teacher as well, so that they can look at what their impact was. So this particular teacher had high growth, but it matched their students' achievement level. So if we had low growth and a high achievement, then we know that that teacher could extend more. And so I work with the principals in how to read these and what things to look for as they review this with their faculty, and then of course when they sit down with their principal or with their student, with their teachers with this report, it helps them identify some areas that they might want to set some goals. And you can also see at that last line on this teacher, there's a Salt Lake City median growth percentile that tells the teacher where they ranked amongst other teachers in their content and grade level.
Can I ask a question, Michelle? So I just want to make sure I'm reading this. So the top page is the class, or the whole school, right?
The whole school.
So 321 represents a whole school.
So that represents students that have at least 2 tests. So this is why we don't want our principals to share this at SCC. That's why it says confidential at the top. In part, not because the data is necessarily confidential, but because if it's not explained well to someone in a public setting, they may say, hey, this isn't accurate. So the way that we calculate growth is we need 2 test scores for each student, right, from one year to the other. And to do that, we need to do the calculation. And not all of our students have 2 test scores. They may not have been in our school or our district 1 year. If they've been in the district anywhere, we pull that test score, though.
Okay.
And we use that to calculate this particular growth score,
So
yeah.
the top one, this one that we're looking at is the school, and then the bottom one is actually by class. Is that right?
It's actually by teacher.
By teacher.
Yes, and the teachers also bother me. No, they don't. They ask for this like as soon as they can get it. I don't know if all teachers want it, but it seems like I get a lot of requests each August for this. They want to see what their impact was, which is what I really like. In the last 3 or 4 years, that's been a really important piece
And
for
is it
them.
the same rule, 2 tests?
It is, yep.
Okay.
So we will, and then also if a teacher shares a student, like let's say they move from one school to another, we actually allocate points, partial points, and make sure that it's weighted so that each teacher receives a partial. So that one's a trickier calculation.
So
but-
would they be able to also have the same information? Let's say it's a 3rd grade teacher, but they want to see from 2nd grade to 3rd grade. Can they look at that also? You know, just to see, here's what they were doing in 2nd grade, here's where they're at in 3rd grade, so that as they're doing their PLCs, they can see that.
Yeah, our teachers have access to all of their
All of
student
theirs.
level data in a different dashboard. It's called Illuminate. And I don't talk about Illuminate much with cabinet or district level because they don't use that dashboard, but our teachers have access to multiple reports. They can put their own tests in there. They can review historical data, so they can pull up a class roster and see their students' historical assessments, and they can also see the rank of a student in their class, so they can immediately identify students that might need Tier 2 or Tier 3 right away before they've even met the student. So,
Well, that's so, thank you.
yeah, that's a good system.
Well, I always like to just volunteer excellence one last time. So if you'll click to our last slide.
Oh, sorry.
Um,
Whoops, no, not that one.
I cannot say enough about the ability of Dr. Amio's team to be able to look at data and evaluate that data and help us see where we need to go and what we need to do. If you would like anything else, I volunteer her team to
We're
to
happy
do that.
to
So
come, yeah, it's fine.
we know that we do need to come back and bring some data to you around graduation and around WIDA testing and some other things that we have access to later in the year. So maybe we'll look at those read students
Yeah, we
and
can-
be able to bring those back to you. But thank you for your thoughtful consideration. This was a very long presentation. I don't know if you looked at the agenda tonight and thought, I'm going to be home by 7 o'clock.
No.
Okay, I always get a little nervous because I'm not ever sure, you know, if this is, but I appreciate your thoughtful questions and I appreciate your obvious concern for the achievement of our students and the health of our students. And I want you to know that everybody in this room and on our superintendent's cabinet is deeply committed to this work and to making that improvement and those things happen as we build better systems to ensure that we're able to do that for every student in our district. So again, thank you for your time.
May I make just one comment? So, thank you. I think that as I look at this, one of the things that's helpful for me, Dr. Hall and Dr. Amio, is that the investment that we've made, a long-term investment with our coaches and with the programs that we invest in, that evaluation piece comes through on this. And I think that we don't talk about that enough, you know, to say, these are the resources that we've put towards these programs. The question that Nate asked earlier, what more do we need to do, always needs to be a part of it. But I think that maybe because of COVID and because of the learning losses that we've shied away from, you know, not really digging into that part of it, because without fail, I always hear one thing or another about, well, you know, you made this huge investment in coaches, is it really working? And I think that when we get reports like this, it's helpful, you know, to see the different areas, to be able to talk about letters, to be able to see, yes, there are gaps, but there's also growth. So for me, it still comes back to what you asked, Nate, that what more do we still need to do? So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Dr. Hall, Dr. Amio.
Thank you.
All right, board, we're moving on to our action agenda. We do have one pending item that was pulled off of the consent agenda regarding item number 5, the memo recommending that we are in concert with state law to provide additional public comment time in our November 7th and November 20th board meetings. I would entertain a motion.
I move that the board approve the memorandum entitled Extension of Time for Public Comment on the condition that the memorandum is edited to reflect that both the November 7th, which is a Tuesday, and November 20th, which is a Monday, that board meetings will be held at their regular location in the temporary district offices in this boardroom.
Second.
Got a motion and a second on the table. Any discussion to the motion? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and start us off with a roll call vote. Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Bryce Williams, yes.
Jenny Sika, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
That motion carries. Superintendent, if you don't mind making the necessary arrangements for our
Yes.
website and working with Director Chatwin to make sure that everything gets out to the community about these meetings and the additional time would be awesome. Excellent.
Will do, thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. And you still have the microphone, as it is the superintendent's report.
It is. Before I start, I want to just say, in our audience today, we did not have public comment at the study session meeting today, but we did have parents representing schools who are on our further study list for possible closure, and I want to recognize the parents who were here. I also want to recognize that there were about 40 or more people here advocating for Glendale High School. I want to note that they took the time to come to a board meeting wearing T-shirts that said "Say Yes to Glendale High," just to acknowledge that public participation and things, and to recognize and perhaps to let them know that public comment period will be in our next session in order to sign up on the board's agenda. I want to make sure they understand that there are times when we do that and times that we don't in our meetings, but I appreciated that the families were here with children in order to fight for a cause that they care about. I have on here just some remarks that I actually am going to keep a little bit short. I have been now in the role for just over 100 days. We'll plan to increase that number over time. But it has been a remarkable 100 days, and it is a privilege to serve as the superintendent of the Salt Lake City School District. And so my first order of business is just to say thank you. Thank you to the board members. Thank you to the cabinet, who have played such an important role over these first 100 days. I don't think that will change in the second or third 100 days, the role that I will ask them to play in being a support and being teachers and helping guide this district forward. I also want to say thank you to you as board members for the opportunity to work with you for the cause here. And we have seen that cause, particularly in the START data that Dr. Hall and Dr. Amio presented to us, and the challenges that we have, which are terribly real, and I think of such central importance that it is again a privilege to be part of problem solving in that area. I want to give you just a short look at what these 3 months have been, because I think it's been important to recognize some of the themes that I have seen in the district and share those with you just quickly. I've met with dozens of people. My aim in this was to listen and learn in these first few months and try and gain an understanding of what's working well in the district, what isn't, how we're responding as a district, and what people's cares and concerns have been. I have talked with our cabinet members individually, of course in groups as teams, but individually, and other leaders in the district. I have met with school principals in small groups and as individuals as I go out to visit schools and see them more closely. I have talked with parents, recently having a meeting with the SEC chairs. I have talked with a couple of the high school student body officer groups to learn more about their concerns as well. I've spoken with 3 neighborhood community councils and the West Side Coalition to get those perspectives and have an additional community council meeting on the agenda. I've met with college and university leaders, with the provost of the University of Utah, Mitzi Montoya, Denise Hufflin, who is the president of Salt Lake Community College, with Dean Frankie Lannon, who is running the College of Education up at the University of Utah, and Mary Burbank there, as well as with Dean Chakrabarty, who is the new leader of the Architecture and Urban Planning School, to talk about the partnerships that we can have and what we can create together for our students in the district. I've met with city and state leaders, with the mayor and with city council, with our chair Darren Mano and vice chair Victoria Petro, as well as with Senate President Stuart Adams in our legislature. I've met with representatives of an interfaith coalition who are concerned about trying to stop hate in our city and in our state. And I've met with business and civic leaders across the community who are ready and stand in to support our district. We talked at the board retreat just a couple of weeks ago about the goals we have for this district. The Salt Lake City School District will be and can be the flagship district in this state. And as you know, I've said before, we can lead in growth, and this is why it's so important that we're measuring growth with the work that Dr. Amio's team is doing in capturing that and working with schools around that. We can lead in equity, we can lead in opportunity, and we can lead in accomplishment. I think these are all very relevant, and I want to raise just some themes that I have seen across the board in talking to so many people over these last few months. First, that there are great things going on in our classrooms. We have remarkable teachers. We have remarkable teachers. They are veterans, they are accomplished, and they are doing things for our students that matter. We need to get better, as we've seen in the data, about the delivery of instruction and learning. But we have remarkable teachers, and the principals I have spoken with have reported that to me, their perception of that. So there are great things going on in the classroom. We are at the forefront of delivering important services to our students. The health clinic is just started at West High School. In the time that I've been here, we've got that health clinic started. There was a vision clinic that opened at Parkview Elementary. There's the second year of the UTA bus pass program that we have in collaboration with the city and with UTA to provide passes to all of our students for transportation, as well as this year to a single family member who can also reap that benefit. I had the fun to go to Northwest the other day, where we opened up the futsal mini pitch. The Real Salt Lake players had helped build. The U.S. Soccer Foundation had helped put in at Northwest Elementary. And perhaps most importantly, we have started the conversation with our community about emphasizing academic discourse in our classrooms and making sure that the talk and conversation in classrooms is leading to student learning, that's a central focus of it. I think perhaps the most important message I want to share is how much support we have in the community. It has been almost overwhelming, the way that people have expressed their interest in being beside us as we work to improve student achievement in Salt Lake District. They are there and ready to be partners with us in moving forward. And I think we have all sorts of resources to tap. This is the original richness that we talked about maybe 4 months ago on my hire, and in those conversations that we had together about the idea that we have the talent within this district and the support in the community surrounding this district to be this flagship district in the state. What it will take, and I'd like to be a little bit academic in my approach in sharing this, is what is known in sociological circles as civic capacity. Civic capacity is the ability of a community to collectively address problems. And we need civic capacity at all levels of our system, meaning at the community level, at the district level, and at the school level. And it is about a cohesion and an alignment and a shared understanding of what our problems are and how we're going to move forward. And so when we talk about some of the challenges ahead, I think one of the largest ones is that we are a district with atomized schools who work independently rather than cohesively around goals that are I want to say this, as a principal said, we need to create a foundation of similarity across our schools rather than a foundation of variety that we have right now. We have this tremendous model of shared governance, which has created new and innovative projects that does the work of democratic decision-making, which has to be the basis of what we're creating in civic capacity, that we all are getting that shared understanding. But it has also increased the variety of programs and options and ideas and approaches that we have in the district, which has tended to atomize the community rather than bringing it together. What I've heard in conversation after conversation is this desire for a foundation of similarity upon which we build some variety, rather than a foundation of variety upon which we have some similarity. This, to me, is one of the overarching pieces of what we need to do in the coming years. And I mentioned shared governance. It is a tool that is both leading to the greatest things that are happening in our schools, as well as one that can often stymie those things. Both those things are true at different times in different places. Had the good fortune to talk with the SLEA representatives, James Tollerler and Mike Harmon in particular, who are willing to take a second look at this and talk about how shared governance can help us move forward on increasing student achievement, that we can focus on that as the shared goal in our efforts and think about what a next iteration of shared governance would look like that is so solely focused on that goal and that moves us forward. Certainly one of the, I think, the big things that we need to accomplish in the coming years. Another is to give attention to our internal communications as a district and the consistency and ability to share what needs to be shared with our principals and our teachers in the district. And that, I think, is not just a one-way street, but a two-way street, which means getting back from them input into what we're doing in all of our programs and in our policies as well. We need to invest in our success, and we have talked about this before. I think the area that has been highlighted most recently, well, for me in these last 3 months, is the area of special education. And what's remarkable about so many of these challenges that we face is that I know that our team within the district is already moving forward on so many of them, and we have put on the agenda in November a further conversation about finances and particularly this idea of supporting and funding special education a little bit differently. We need to consistently and forever work to create welcoming spaces for our students and our staff. We need to stop the harassment and bullying and racism that was consistently reported in my conversations with people who live and work in schools. Again, we are doing things to move forward in this, and I'm excited about our Dignity project and the Dignity work, and being able to meet with Tim Shriver, one of the national leaders on that project this week, with a lot of our team to introduce to the idea and start the conversation about what that can look like in our district to raise the bar, that we treat each other with dignity, adults to adults, adults to children, student to student, across the board. And when I say this idea of civic capacity at the community level, it is tapping into all of those resources so the community itself becomes part of our problem-solving process, that they help us move this forward. The way that education improves is by this consistent work around a shared understanding of the problem and a shared approach to the solution, so that when I say we need to create similarity across our schools, it is not a sameness as much as it is a clarity that we are pulling in the same direction, that we are using the advantages of community and shared learning so that our schools are learning from each other, we're sharing best practices back and forth, that we are not alone in this work and building that. So at the community level, that will happen. At the district level, it is creating that same sort of process of civic capacity, and it is at the school level that schools themselves take on that ability to learn together as a community. Again, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. We spoke about that flagship district, which means we're going to implement the programs that we're working on, and we're going to build new things. We are going to implement the reading initiative. Dr. Hall was talking about that with this data. We are doing that year after year for the next 5 or more years. We are implementing that reading initiative so that we see changes in those achievement gaps. Board Member Sweat, I think we're all disturbed by the size of those. And this is one place where I think we have some concentrated attention in our professional development and our expectations across the board and across the state, certainly. So plan to see some changes in that. We are implementing social emotional learning and this dignity work to raise the bar and expectations for our community and our district. And we are implementing the strategic plan. which has got the pillars around educational equity and sustainability and growth that we are looking at as a district. And I appreciate the work that the team is doing to oversee that implementation and capture the changes that we have. The other piece is that we're going to build. We're going to build those career pathways. We're going to build those college pathways. Those career pathways, again, one of the things that is so remarkable about this district that we're at the forefront of so many things. Innovation in full-day kindergarten, innovation in apprenticeships at the other end of the line for students. That we were part of the first state apprenticeship program. We are now, in my first 30 days, I get to join in when we've just become part of the second state apprenticeship program in the state. And we are the district at the forefront. When I have talked with these community leaders, the career pathways is one of the things they want to give most heartily to. They want to connect us with businesses and help us work with in industry and manufacturing and the companies around town to build these pathways for our students that are institutionalized pathways within our structure that people know about as they enter elementary school and junior high and can see the opportunities ahead. We're going to build college pathways. One of the reasons I was talking with the dean in the School of Architecture and Urban Planning was their desire to partner with us about a college pathway that would lead more students into those careers around architecture and urban planning, as well as now a gaming program, which has just been put into that same school. I'm sure we'll have trouble finding students to join that program. But trying to find ways that we can create smooth pathways for students to move through and continue their learning in supported ways. So we're going to build college pathways, we're going to build career pathways, and we're going to make this district the preferred place to work. So we have a lot of tasks in hand. We have a lot of challenges in hand. But again, want to just say my thanks to you, my thanks to the team and the people I've worked with and the great work I am seeing in schools, and this recognition that there is such opportunity here. There is such possibility. I'm going to keep going on a soapbox for one more minute and then I'll stop. I was sharing this with the team today. Recently, the state, the Gardner Institute put out a report about the state of Utah. I don't know if you saw it, about the changes demographically that are happening in our state. It's called The New Utah. And they mark some real changes. We are getting older as a state. It's one of the reasons we're having challenges with enrollment in Salt Lake City School District. We are becoming more diverse as a state. We are growing as a state. Couple of points around Salt Lake City which I think shape my thinking and my hopefulness for what's ahead. The Salt Lake City commuter area, which means the area from Davis County down to Alpine School District and then up to Summit County, has the highest level of economic mobility in the country. Your chances of improving your life standing economically is greater in this area of the country than anywhere else. The second data point is that if you are born in the bottom 20% in the socioeconomic range, your chances of reaching the top 20% are double the national average. Here just in Salt Lake City, just in the city itself, not the whole commuter area, just our city, your chances of that kind of movement are double the national average. This is just a place of opportunity. And these conversations with community members and with our leaders in our district has been about that opportunity and what we can accomplish. And it'll take some time. It'll take some time. We looked at test scores today. Test scores are stunningly hard to move. But opportunity is graspable. We can create these pathways for students in which they succeed. And so I'm excited to be part of it. I want to thank you for it and look forward to what's to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Grant.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know how we're going to follow it up with board reports. Just kidding. Thank you, Dr. Jett. It's very well-meaning, and we appreciate all that you've done and look forward to what we'll do together, too. Board member reports. Let's start with Bryce.
I'm still here. I don't have anything.
Are you still there, Bryce?
I'm still here. I don't have anything to report this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you're feeling better. Board member Sika?
Nope, I'm good, thank you.
Board member Bade?
Yes, quickly, it is an honor to have you on board. You know, when I go to schools and visit, that's one of my favorite parts, is going to schools actually and just meeting teachers, custodians, and, you know, everyone out there, and it's just like so fantastic, and everyone speaks very highly of you. And I just want to say thank you. Yeah, my goodness. I had also the honor of going to Horizonte and just seeing the new class we have in there and meeting the students. You know, it is sad to see that the sad reality is that the society sometimes disadvantages a certain group and they become victims of the society. And as a result of that, they are labeled in the society. And just being there and being able to look them straight in the face and relate to them, it's like the simplest thing we can continue to do in our lives. And this is how I've come to, you know, continue to build on those relationships. And those kids, I look at them straight in the eye and I was like, you know, I am placed in this office so I can make sure you are taken care of. And they felt that they belong. They felt that they are part of the community. They felt that, I tell them, anytime you feel like you fell and you can't get up, look at yourself and just say, what would Muhammad do? Yep, that's the motto out there. So they know what would Muhammad do out there. So just meeting with them and connecting with them, they are children of families whom the society unfortunately has disadvantaged. So that's one. Also had the honor of going to Riley Elementary, and you can just see the positive, energy out there. Yes, their school is in the list, but they are thinking outside the box in what they need to do if the school is to stop, instead of like thinking about, oh no, our school is going to close, and they're focusing just on that. And to me, now, I just want to say to the principal out there and everyone, thank you for thinking outside the box. Also, one more thing, I appreciate you for bringing the issue with the bullying that we deal with in our schools, unfortunately. Given the recent atrocious events that are taking place in Palestine and Israel, and I just want to send a message to all the parents and everyone in our district that we have zero tolerance for anything anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or anything that disenfranchises and hurts other people just because of who they are, what they look like, what they believe in. That is just, we're all human beings. We all have spent 9 months in our mother's womb, and we came to this earth. And when our journey is over, we're all going to share the same dirt on this face of this earth. And so, and I hope, I hope that we will continue, and I hope the parents will be able to talk to their kids to stop any of this bullyism in our schools, because this is a school district where everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome. This is your safe space. And I just want to let you guys know about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Bade. Board Member Anderson?
Yes. There have been some exciting conversations in the West SCC about how to implement aspects of the board's strategic plan, including growth for the career program, which is a track within IB, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that in the future. All of the elementary schools in Precinct 3 had successful fall fundraisers, and I appreciate all the community members who supported those events. I also wanted to congratulate Ensign on a successful assembly with the University of Utah softball team this morning, who came to speak to students about their monthly performance results goal. Outside of Precinct 3, I got to visit the new community art space at Escalante Elementary. And I don't know how many board members know, but Escalante uses Arts Council funding to provide classes for families of students as well as students. So for example, after school, parents can participate in ceramics class, among other opportunities. And what the art specialist, Megan Hallett, does there is really extraordinary. I'd like to thank Jennifer Newell, who's here, because she attended the Bryant SCC on behalf of the mayor's office and listened to some parent concerns about the new traffic pattern on South Temple. And because the board can't take action on that type of planning, I appreciate her directing those concerns to the appropriate place in transportation. And this is our last meeting during LGBT History Month, so I wanted to share that it was on this day in 1995 that after an international tribunal, sexual orientation was considered part of the human rights agenda of the United Nations.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. Board Member Jensen.
Yes, I've had the opportunity of attending several SCC meetings this past month, the 2 high schools in my precinct and middle schools and several elementary schools. And I just really want to thank all of those parents and teachers and administrators who, I mean, they're working hard to support students in their achievement. And I mean, it's really exciting when you're at, you know, those meetings and Highland is talking about being listed in U.S. News and World Reports. I mean, that's an accomplishment, and I want them to be able to celebrate that. I appreciate the report that you gave today on the student data and the review. And I guess I really want to express my appreciation to the teachers that are in the trenches every day. And when I look at those results, I experience the frustration that I had while I was in the classroom, where they don't reflect a lot of the successes that you are making day by day. And I want to thank you for that, because those assessments don't reflect all of the factors that go into students succeeding. And thank you, teachers, for all that you're doing. I commend you. And then I went to a football game for each of the 3 high schools that have football games, and it's really fun to be there and to see the excitement and the school spirit that all of you have. And the Salt Lake City School District it's a wonderful place to be. Finally, those SCC chairs that went and attended that additional meeting that you held for them, Dr. Grant, I appreciate your doing that. But I also appreciate the time that they took to come and be with you. And I also appreciate the willingness of those SCCs to now rise up and say, okay, if we need to have 2 SCC meetings a month to work through all of the questions that are going to develop as we go through this transitional phase. We really do live in a remarkable community, Dr. Grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Jensen. Board Member Sweat.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. I loved hearing your report. It's always nice to have a look back. I think sometimes we forget all of the great things that we're, doing and providing to our community through your advocacy. So thank you for going through that with us. Would you mind confirming the address that we're supposed to go to dinner with Dr. Shiver?
It's the Monson Center over on South Temple.
Okay, so it's 411 East?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's the right one. Okay, thanks. So I had two really interesting conversations this past week that I wanted to share with you and with all of you, that when you think about our wonderful SEL goals that we have and the care that we're taking, with our students and with our employees, one of the things that we aren't looking at is the care of our district office and our board. I think that self-care is so important for each of us. I know that many of us have sleepless nights. We worry about the things, that we're tackling. but we don't really talk about the self-care of each other. And I think that it's important that we look at that and we talk about that, because, we have some hard things on our plates all the time, not just right now. There's always something that's coming up. So I'd really like to encourage us to really talk about that in the next little while, to look at what does self-care look like for the district office and for the board. The other thing is, I had this interesting question asked to me of what do you think that school board members need right now as far as leadership skills and also information. And one of the things amongst several things that we talked about was talking about equity. I think that statewide, for whatever reason, it's not a conversation that happens at the state level the way that it should. And especially with us as board members, I would just like to encourage us one more time to really consider that Salt Lake District lead out in this conversation around equity, that we have a conference, and that if anybody wants to come to it, we do that, but to really look at what that would look like for an urban district, but also a rural district. I think that equity is not about division. It's about opportunities for kids. And I think that I would just really like us to consider looking at something like that, and that Salt Lake really leads out in that conversation. Last, I know all of you received an email from Richard to remind you that on December 13th, NSBA is hosting its first Rural Schools Conference. It's it's of no cost, but I think it would be important for us with us being an urban district, it's good for us to hear, the issues that our rural counterparts, look at and also have to deal with on a day-to-day basis within their districts, because many times we can partner with them, and there's also professional development that can be done together. So I'm excited about this new step that National School Boards is taking, and there'll also be a component before the first day of conference in New Orleans. So this is the first step, and then we'll have this wonderful piece that will be in New Orleans. So I encourage you, if you have time, to log into that in the afternoon on December 13th.
Thank you, Board Member Sweat. I've just got a couple of things. Speaking of football games, I had the chance to attend the East-West game, the first game in 11 years between the two schools. It's kind of shocking to think about. West broke a 11-year losing streak to East. This leopard it's hard for me to say that, but nonetheless, I congratulate all of our students. I think our student athletes, our cheerleaders, Josiah is on the cheer squad at West, and they just did a phenomenal job, not only on the field, but just the work that I think went into the event. Dr. Jared Wright really put on a great show, literally, and in his coordination, he sang a wonderful national anthem. He did. Oh yeah, and then just the halftime shows were amazing, and so that was all really fun to attend that. And Brian, just to back your statement up, that we have a wonderful community, and it was on full display that evening on October 6th. A lot of fun. I also had the chance to attend the mini pitch dedication from RSL and the United Soccer Federation. I think I found my new calling as a goalkeeper.
Oh, I think you did.
I didn't pull a hamstring, thank goodness, but nonetheless, they did score 2 goals on me. But that was really fun to see the students and their appreciation. Just awesome students. So my shout out to Northwest and Principal Seminario for all the work that she does there. And then I also had the chance to attend the last information meeting with parents on school boundary closure, on school boundaries and potential school closure. Board Member Jensen was there with me. It was really informative to hear from parents, and I want to remind parents that we have another meeting tomorrow night at Northwest Middle School, 7 to 9 p.m. I can't stress this enough, that childcare is provided, and that Spanish translation will be available as well tomorrow night, and we will look forward to seeing folks out at that meeting tomorrow. And that is and then one on Saturday as well. That's correct, on the 21st. I'll pull that up right here. And that'll be at Franklin Elementary this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Again, stressing that childcare and Spanish translation will be available.
That one will be conducted
That one's
in
conducted,
Spanish
yes, conducted in Spanish.
with English translation.
With English translation. I read that backwards. Scratch that, reverse it. So, Willy Wonka there. But nonetheless, we really hope to see everybody available, that's available to be there to join us.
And the
for
final
that.
one is a week from tomorrow.
Yes,
at
on
Hillside.
October 25th. So we'll keep you posted on all these dates and hope to see everybody there. I can't call for an adjournment. The board still needs to finish up some business in our closed session, and I'd look for a motion.
I move that the board on October 17th, 2023, go into closed executive session to discuss negotiations and the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, and that the board adjourn immediately following the closed session.
Second.
A motion and a second on the table. Any discussion?
Everybody was talking, so I thought, okay, I'll say.
We'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Bade.
This page.
Mom and
Mom, you have to
Griffin.
vote.
You have to
Can't leave, you
vote.
gotta vote.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian?
Ryan, you have to vote.
Oh. Brian Jensen, yes.
Sorry, I didn't hear Christie. Bryce
Looking
Williams,
for you,
yes.
Bryce.
Sorry, I didn't hear Christie. Bryce Williams, yes.
Christy
Sika, yes.
Sweat, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes. That motion passes. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. If you don't mind exiting the room, at least all of those that need to, and we'll re-adjourn. Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
I'm gone for one.
Lordy, Lordy. Okay. Oh, that was great. Thank you.